everyone, my name is Judy. I'm the Research and Development Coordinator with Liebe Group. Today we're doing a virtual fieldwalk so you can watch from wherever you are. We are looking at a demonstration site that is part of the Ripper Gauge project, a GRDC funded project that is being run by the West Midlands Group. In this project we're looking at different cultivation techniques to see which is most effective over the long term. This is a 3-year project and we're currently in our 3rd and final year. In this project, we've looked at the offset disc, deep ripping, combined maximum tillage, and speed disc tillage.
I'm Nathan Craig, I'm the Executive Officer of the West Midlands Group, and I'm also the Project Manager for what is called the Ripper Gauge project. So the Ripper Gauge project was established in 2018. It's a 3-year project, so it's due to finish early next year, and it runs over 3 consecutive seasons to evaluate the use of deep ripping on some of the other soil types across the agricultural region of WA. So a lot of the previous work that's been done on deep ripping really focuses on the deeper soils and especially in the northern ag region. Those soils are a lot easier to deep rip than some of the other heavier and other soil types. And so, growers are pretty enthused and there's good results in the research, but at that time there wasn't a lot of evidence around how some of these other soil types would respond to deep ripping. And so this Ripper Gauge project focuses more on the other soil types in each of our regions, and with the idea of collecting data and validating what we know from the sands. So there are 20 sites that range from Una in the north down to Esperance in the southeast, and those projects, those sites are managed by our collaborating grower groups. There's 9 in total, so quite a large and collaborative project. At each trial site there are 4 common treatments, so being a control being one where there's no soil amelioration, and then there's a deep rip to 30 centimetre depth, a deep rip to 60, and then a 4th treatment which is the local grower, what we call a local grower solution. And most commonly that has involved a combination of different soil amelioration strategies. So it could be deep ripping and, say for example, plozza ploughing, or deep rip and spading. But a common one that a lot of people used, a lot of groups trialled, was the use of ripping, deep ripping and aggressive tillage with some of the new machines that are currently available. In 2018, with starting the trials, we encountered a few issues in trying to set up each site. Particularly 2018 was a very dry summer. The soil types that we're evaluating range from some kind of more white and pale sands, some high rainfall sands, through to gravel-based soils, forest gravels, and into some of your heavier clays. And what we found, particularly with the heavier clays, is that being very dry after summer, they were really hard to deep rip, and so one site actually had to be deep ripped with a bulldozer because that was the only thing we could really get into the ground. Not ideal, but this is a trial, so we can try what's needed. One of the other sites was just too hard and lower rainfall, so that site was fallowed for the first year and deep ripped in spring. So part of this project has found that actually doing the amelioration is just part of the battle, let alone growing a successful crop on top. One of the other things we found in the first year, particularly where there was aggressive tillage, was that that high soil disturbance actually caused a lot of the weeds to germinate, and that caused a lot of issue in those treatments at the site. So there's definitely other considerations that need to be considered as you when you're thinking about potentially taking on these in some of these other soil types. One thing that the Ripper Gauge project is focusing on is the collection of the grain yield data, so we can understand what the production benefit is, but also the economics. And to date, some of the early economic work we've done has been quite variable, and so there really is a cause for some cautiousness when going into these soils. But the results from this trial should be available early, mid next year, and will be presented and both through the local grower groups with their individual trials, and also with the overall project outcomes will be collated and pulled together, and some kind of looking at trends across the state and across soil types. Some of the results from the second year, there were a lot smaller yield responses. In the first year, we saw if you loosely categorise the soils as a sand-based soil, then they responded more to deep ripping, and that kind of fits with the earlier work in the sandy soils. Anything with a gravel base tend to respond in the first year to more aggressive tillage, and so but that wasn't prolonged in the second year. So a lot smaller yield benefits in the second year. So we're really looking forward to this third year of data now to really give us that long-term response and the economics around it.
I'm at the demonstration site in Kalannie with Rowan McCreery. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business?
Yeah, hi, Rowan McCreery. We farm east and west of Kalannie. We've been here since Granddad cleared it in 25. So, there's a mixed enterprise. We still run livestock at about 30% sheep and 70% crop. That's basically our business.
So tell us a little bit about the trial. Why did you first become involved back 3 years ago?
We've got a big history of liming, so we're just working out how to incorporate that lime at depth, I guess, and we have been offsetting to about 250 mil all our lime program. So we just want to move to the next phase, and we thought we'd assess the tools that were out there at the time and go from there. So
very interesting. So what have you noticed over the course of the years between the treatments?
Initially we had a few issues with getting the seed depth. It was seeded with a precision seeder with the equaliser, but we still had a few issues getting good seed soil contact, which did inhibit a couple of the early trials, and weed control. We have certainly learnt a lot about weed control in the trial through ryegrass, hence why there's lupins in here now. So in the year we put the trial down, we had a fair bit of ryegrass come through quite late. So the year after we put an oat crop in for hay, which as the season turned out, it didn't go through to hay because of the dry finish, so we've spray topped it out, and then this year I've gone back in with lupins. But the trial itself, we've noticed the two deep ripping parts of it, the horse tiger and the Ausplough easy tiller, have certainly stood out even this year as well. So it's been interesting to watch them over a few years, and the strips and stuff, especially on the NDVIs, they really show up quite well there. So this is probably the first year we'll have good harvest results off it.
Given what you've seen across the years, what techniques do you think you'll be using on your property again?
So after the second year, we could clearly see the difference, and after the trial we had use of the horse tiger and the deep ripper, so we just went and ripped a few other test strips around the farm. So since then we've gone and bought a Ausplough easy tiller, and we've now started ripping up to 400 to 500 hectares a year over mainly our wodgel soils. We've sort of started there, and this year it's a massive difference we've noticed in the deep ripping with the dry finish this year. There's my plant counts were up to nearly a tonne difference between where we've ripped and haven't ripped this year. Yeah, so I guess basically from this trial, yeah, we've gone down that path.
Thank you very much, Rowan. It's been great having you talk to us here today. Let's go have a closer look at the trial and talk a little bit about our results so far. So let's talk a little bit about our results. Before we started and before we implemented any cultivation techniques, there was a hard pan at the site at about 200 millimetres below the surface. Through various cultivation techniques, most have broken most of that pan, but the deeper cultivation techniques have had a more significant effect and broken that pan to a more significant depth. So the maximum tiller and the deep ripper took that hard pan all the way down to 400 millimetres, whereas the other two treatments only brought it down to 250. So this was all really interesting, but now we're going to head out to the Dalwallinu site and catch up with Blayn and see how that's been going over the last 3 years. Now we're out at Blayn Carlshausen's property in Dalwallinu. This demonstration site is slightly simpler. We've only got one replicate of each treatment, and the treatments we're looking at are slightly different. In this demonstration, we're looking at a offset disc, a deep ripper, a maximum tiller, and the combination of a deep ripper with an offset disc. Now let's see how Blayn's doing and talk to him a little bit about the history of the trial. So we're here with Blayn at his Dalwallinu site for the Ripper Gauge project. The site is in its third and final year of monitoring. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your business, Blayn?
Yeah, so my name's Blayn Carlshausen. I farm with my wife and brother and his wife, and my parents, Ron and Mary. We run a 100% cropping, 2/3 cereal, 1/3 canola and lupins.
Okay, so this trial has been running for a fair while now. Why did you first become interested in being involved?
First involvement was we were running a conventional deep ripper, and there was new style of deep ripping coming out, the Horsches, and then there was also some use of ripping and then running a offset disc over for amelioration. So we thought we'd trial that.
Yeah, so we've had some interesting results come through from those treatments. What have you noticed over the course of the year yourself, just from working the land and looking at the different strips?
Probably the biggest one originally was the weed control in the areas that we used the offsets over the deep ripper. Also the horse tiger, we had a bit of trouble controlling the grasses in the first 2 years.
Yeah.
Most of those are under control now, but there has definitely been a yield advantage as well by implementing the trials.
Yeah, definitely. So have you started employing any of these techniques across your property since the trial?
Yeah, so we sold our deep ripper that we had, a conventional deep ripper that went to 30 centimetres, and we've bought a bednar, and we also hired another bednar this year. So since the last year and the year before, we've done 5,000 hectares with the bednars, which are a similar machine to the Horsch.
Thank you for that, Blayn. That's really interesting. Now we're going to go across to the trial and talk a little bit about the results we've seen over the years. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the results from the trial. Before we did any of our treatments at this site, we had a compaction layer, or compaction, it wasn't really a layer, from 200 millimetres all the way down to depth that we sampled to. And then after the treatments, we had some varied results. Basically, each treatment disrupted the compaction layer down to its working depth. So that was 200 millimetres for the offset disc, and then 450 millimetres for the deep ripping, the Horsch Tiger, and the combination. We have seen results with yield mirroring the effects you would expect there, where the soil has been disrupted to a deeper depth and rooting depth has increased more with the different crops. It has had a greater effect on yield, with the deep ripping having the best effect on yield. We think the combination of the deep ripping with the offset disc may have overworked the soil and not been as effective as the deep ripper on its own. Thanks everyone. If you want to have a few more details about this trial and its results, you can find all of that in this year's R&D book that'll be coming out in February.